Bang ding ding, trademark. He come out 6'7" tall. Bang ding ding, one is star. Bang dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding dong ding. It is a perfect day.
Woke up to the sound of the garbage truck again. Upstairs neighbor's toilet's leaking on my head. Cars broke down, I missed the bus that runs at 10. I had a feeling this was a day to stay in bed. I finally left my pad right on the jumper's cloud roof. A police officer pulled out his gun and said, I said, sir, you got the wrong guy. I guess it's just a perfect day. It's just a perfect day. Na, 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 na,
Hey everybody, and welcome back to a very exciting episode of Eggs. That's right. Listeners of the show know that not only is this the last show of the year, but it's also our best, and this year is no exception. It's the 5th annual Eggy Awards. Now, what's an Eggy, you might ask? Well, it's our opportunity to celebrate just a few of the more than 50 amazing guests willing to grace our airwaves in the last calendar year. We take some clips, we mash them up all together into a superpowered, highly motivating podcast that will give you a quick look at some of the fantastic content we've created this year. Today, we'll feature 6 guests from a swath of categories who've appeared on the show this year and treat your listening ears with a little dash of the wisdom they so generously dropped on the show. And let me tell you, the selection process isn't easy, but for those walking away with a coveted Eggy Award, thank you for your contribution not only to our show, but to the lives of those who listen every day. Who will win top honors? Listen in to find out. Now, on with the show.
First up in the Eggy Awards for the music category, we have Drew Smith. Drew is an award-winning professional songwriter for RIAA Gold and is a country artist based in Nashville, Tennessee. He is the owner of Gray Sound Recording and has worked with artists such as Merle Haggard and Randy Houser, Rob Snyder, Jason Charles Miller, and many, many more. We had a legit conversation, and I'm really excited to share this clip with you.
Do you have any recordings that you have done that stand out to you as like, this is my favorite session, this is my favorite artist, this is my go-to for, like, if I were to put something in a portfolio to demo me as a recording person, this is what I would put in there? Is there anything that stands out in your opinion as far as that goes?
Man, that's so hard to answer because I've been real blessed to have had a lot of great moments like that. For me, it's really, instead of it being, one particular thing, I think it's just been a collection of times when you knew that it was right.
Yeah.
And yeah, I work with a ton of studio session players, and it's the guys that are playing on all the hit records that are out right now. It's the A-list guys. Yeah. And so they're great on their worst days. Most of the time we get what we need in 1 or 2 takes, but there have been times when we've had to do 6 or 7 takes on something. But man, you just know it. Everybody knows it. It's not just something that I feel or my assistant feels or whoever's playing guitar that day. Like, everyone knows when that magic just happened. And it's crazy because you realize it when it's happening, and it's like everybody tries to get real still and pretend that it's hard almost to enjoy it. I rolled over my headphone cable and nearly hung myself. It's almost hard to enjoy it because you're so worried about doing anything other than just continuing to do whatever that magic thing is, just letting it happen. So it's like you kind of have to harness it until it's over and then celebrate it and then feel it. Man, there's been so many of those instances. I worked with a guy, I did a record on a guy named Jay Edwards a few years ago. Just the letter J, last name Edwards. And it's this kind of bluesy Americana, just a really gritty. Jay sounds like no one that I've ever heard before in my life. Um, he's this blend between like Joe Cocker and Chris Stapleton, but he's not either of those things. And we had this great record put together, and we recorded it at a couple of different studios here in town. And I remember how magical every one of those recordings were. And it was because, and it was the same thing with him. I brought in all the A-list guys. I brought in Moose Brown, who is a phenomenal songwriter. For one, he's always been a great songwriter, but people mostly know him as a pianist. He's played for Bob Seger for years, and just played on a ton of stuff. Jimmy Buffett, and just so many different people. And tons of, the rest of the band was like that as well, just major accolades. And everyone recognized that this guy was special, that he had a different thing without even trying. And Jay is one of those guys that he talks just like he sings. It's never two different people there. He when he's speaking, he sounds, if you hear him speak and then you hear him sing, you go, oh yeah, I could have guessed that, Yeah. Just a beautiful voice. But I think everyone recognized how special he was. And as a result of that, I think everyone's approach was a little bit different than what it would normally be. Not to say that, they don't try as hard on other things, but Jay he brings something to the room, man, where you just go, my God, this guy is so good. I don't want to do anything that's going to distract from what he's doing. And so you just dig in and you play as well as you can, or you push buttons as well as you can. that whole thing. And to watch that entire project go down, the album is named Cold. And, it's one of the best projects I've ever done, and maybe will ever do, just because there was just so much magic in it.
Yeah, love that. I recently, just for fun. I mean, it was towards the end of COVID. And, I hadn't done anything audio wise. I hadn't really had any gigs or recorded anyone for a while, and so I went and I set up a PA system at an open mic, and just to more for anything, just to be able to record something and mix it down and practice and have that experience again. And this guy showed up. His name was Spike Coggins, and he's a one piece guy. He's got a little he plays a banjo, he plays a harmonica, he's got a little washboard drum underneath him, and his set was phenomenal. And coming out of the COVID situation and not having anything and being able to go and do this show, and it's just a little open mic, but the way the audio turned out and the way that the just everything about that was just a really cool experience. And I love when shows like that happen, when unexpected, like really talented musicians come in and just rock your world, and like, holy crap, yeah, I can't believe I got that on mic. That is like so cool. And I'm sure you have countless stories like that, and I hope to have many more down the road. But yeah, I can relate with that. And just having that musician or that person that's so in tune and so in zone, and be able to just leave it all on the floor it's you can't replicate those situations. And
you really can't, man. And you can't replicate that feeling either. I mean, there's not a drug in this world that feels like that feeling.
Yeah, I was telling someone about that the other day, and they don't, it's like when you have the show, and then everything just goes, and it's the perfect crowd, the perfect environment. You have good audio, good lighting, this and everything. Just when something like that happens, I have to leave. I have to go on a walk and just kind of like take a breath, take it in, feel it, like, holy crap, that was amazing. And I don't think you can replicate that high. I don't think there's a way to do
No.
it. There's just something.
Walking away with the Eggy Award in the self-help category is none other than motivational speaker and performance coach Brian Bogert. Brian's story is a gut-wrenching one, the tale of a young man nearly losing his arm in a terrible accident. But, if you can believe it, it has a happy ending. As opposed to a lifetime of blame and disappointment, Brian found the power within himself through a Herculean effort to accept his situation, learn from it, and embrace a life of gratitude. As a result, Brian learned how to turn what could have been a tragedy and transformed it into a powerful and inspirational career. In choosing a winner for this category, from a field of simply amazing people who graced the show this year, this episode stood out in particular for the good it served both Mike and I. We had an open and honest conversation with Brian and did some real work to improve not only the lives of the many thousands of listeners who tuned in to hear Brian's message, but also ourselves. From October 20th, 2022, episode number 281, your Eggy Award winner in the personal development category is none other than the amazing Brian Bogert. Your story is really interesting, and it's actually resonating with me quite a bit. I'm sitting here listening to your story and listening to the things that you've overcome, and just thinking about in my own life, because I had sort of a similar situation where I shut down, I guess, sort of the outside world after I lost my father. He died when I was 18. And for me, it was kind of, I didn't live with him. We weren't super close or anything, but it still was, it was a big trauma for me. Right. Yeah. And there was a lot of time after that, coming out of high school and going into college, where I became sort of the, I don't care guy. Right. What do you want to do? I don't care. Where do you want to eat? I don't care. Whatever. Right. And I got to the point where I actually felt like I cared so little about whatever we were doing. I was just being so go with the flow that I actually didn't really commit a lot of that time to memory. So now when I go back and I try and think of old times, like, I don't have a lot of old times, and I mean, maybe they're in there deep and somebody could get them out or whatever, but my sort of, I guess, to use your language, this sort of armor that I put up to protect myself around the loss of my dad led me to this spot where I was so complacent and so just like frictionless that, things just started to slip, so it's really interesting to hear you talk about this. And, and I still fight with those problems today. Like, I mean, I'm certainly not through it, but I would also just sort of reflect back to the same sort of thing happened to me with my kids after my first son was born. My shift went from, I don't really care, whatever, no long-term thoughts, no long-term plans, nothing. I actually operated under the assumption I would be dead young, just like my dad was. So it was like, whatever, like, we're not going to make it to retirement. We might as well enjoy ourselves. And, but after having that kid, was a big shift in my mentality, which was now thought for legacy and what does the future look like and all this kind of stuff. And so it was sort of a breakthrough that happened, through becoming a father that really changed my mentality. And like I say, it's still, there's plenty of hurdles that I fight with this all the time, but it's really interesting. So I just wanted to say,
thank you for sharing that, by the way, because here's the reality of it. We all have it. Every single one of us has it. It is part of the human experience. Like I say, it's visceral, it's conditioned. And here's the thing. You've heard me mention the word trash a few times, but I am definitive at this point that the things that keep us stuck are not the wrong strategy and tactics in our lives. It's not going and finding a better sales system. It's not going and finding a different process that you can build your business around. By the way, those are all critically important. I want to be really clear when I say that. I don't mean to negate those, but those are not the things that keep us stuck. Those are the things that help us leverage and scale our lives. The things that keep us stuck are definitively the emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning that has existed in our lives. Now, here's the thing. Our triggers are trash. So triggers are unprocessed and unrooted prior events that develop patterns causing us to project feelings and emotion and behaviors into the present. It's those times when you load the dishwasher incorrectly and your spouse says something different about it, and all of a sudden you get defensive. You're not reacting to what the comment your spouse was. It's how your grandpa told you to do it when you were 4.
That's so true.
And so the reality of it is down the idea of armor, just because I'm going to expand on that for a second. Now that we're talking about trash, like this is why we need to understand how to learn to identify and take out our trash on a regular and consistent basis. Because these things are so deeply buried, and that's what the world has taught us to do, is shove it down. So I told you the first thing it does is it disconnects us, right? Literally from being seen and understood and connecting. The second thing trash does, if I gave both of you a full trash bag to hold in each arm and I asked you to carry it out in front of you, how long could you hold it?
Probably 30 seconds. I'm weak. It's been a minute.
But here's the
Definitely.
thing, right? We hold our trash bags out in front of us because the world tells us to shove it down. Our trash bag might as well be our armor, right? And the reality of it is we're holding that trash bag out there, and the longer we carry it, the heavier it gets and the stinkier it gets. Do you know how many people often come to me and they're like, man, I just feel heavy all the time. I feel like I can't breathe. I'm operating at this. Yeah, guess what? You got a lot of trash in your world, right? The heaviness of that literally slows us down. It creates resistance and energy drain. And the thing is we think our armor is protecting us, but really the longer we carry it, the more it incrementally crushes us. Then let's imagine that invisible force field is just a trash can, okay? And it wraps all the way around us. Now there's two kinds of trash cans in this world. Those that have lids and those that don't. There's also two kinds of people in this world. Those that are really perfectionism and are never going to let the world see what they're actually going through. That was me, by the way.
Right
and then there's those that don't really hide it, but they also aren't really paying attention to who they are and what's really causing it. So let's call we have an open trash can. We can shove it down, 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 right? But at some point we run out of space. So when we run out of space, it starts literally falling over the top and spilling into every other part of our life. It literally starts dumping trash into all the people around us, our associates, our clients, our communities. Oh, by the way, and the most important, our families, right? And so if we understand this, then that's those people that are a little more loosey-goosey. There's no lid, but then there's people like me. There's a lid. I'm not letting anybody see my shit. I'm not letting anybody see my trash. Nobody's going to smell it. I've got a lid on mine. I've got a lock on mine, right? It's pressure locked. I'm literally compressing it real time, right? But what happens?
You explode.
At some point, there's literally nothing else inside. It explodes. Bingo.
Yeah.
And it literally sends shrapnel of trash into every part of your life, creating damage far beyond what we think. And so the reality of it is that our trash, our triggers, are our armor that are keeping us disconnected. And what I'm trying to help everybody understand is that if we actually can just unpack and start digging through our trash, we then start to find the treasures. But here's the other side of it. Trash comes into our world every single day. So if you imagine your home, after COVID, this is a great example. We have our families in our home. We have our extended families in our home. We've got our businesses in our home. We built out, the paradises that we wanted to exist in our backyards and our living rooms and our everything, right? We literally built the lives that we wanted in the home that we were going to be confined to for a period of time. Well, what happens? Trash comes into our world every day. But what do we do with it? We put it in a trash can and we take it out every single day. But if we don't, what happens? That trash in the kitchen is going to start piling over, and all of a sudden it's going to block our kitchen and all where we eat, all our food, our nutrients, our health is going to be impacted because we're not going to be able to get to what we need to feed ourselves. Then it's going to start filling into the hallways and blocking our ability to get to our kids, connect with them, see through the trash that we're actually projecting onto our kids, making them carry the shit that we carried for 30 years that we inherited from our parents, right? Then our in-laws and our family members start coming in, and it starts impacting that because the trash just starts literally blocking every area in our house. Guess what? You don't think it comes into your office, seeps into your office and starts impacting the way you show up for your teams, your associates, your clients? Here's the thing. If we don't allow ourselves to live in trash within our own homes, why do we allow ourselves to feel like garbage on a daily basis because of our undealt with shit?
So
it's time to take out the trash.
So this is one of my favorite analogies I've heard to date. It just is clear, it makes sense, and it totally, it's a great analogy. For someone, Ryan and I have both kind of gone through some trauma and stuff in our lives. Mine's more on like the religious side of things. I had to leave a bad situation and pretty much terminate my relationships with a lot of people just to get out of that environment. And because of that, I kind of went through the same, put up the armor. Took a long time for me to kind of get over that. Is like therapy the only way to go to take out the trash, or is it just self-awareness? What's the first step to kind of like realizing you got a stinky trash can and you got to take it out? And I'm sure it's just one piece at a time, self-awareness kind of, for me, it's been I actually have bought books on Audible to try and study, cognitive behavioral therapy and stuff like that, just to kind of self-diagnose and have that self-awareness. But for someone who doesn't necessarily want to go down that path, what's like the first step? What do you do to take that first piece of garbage out and open the lid on your trash can?
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways I can take this because the first step looks a little different for each person. But let's just ask a question for a second. Let's see how you two hit with it. And oh, by the way, if you guys are up for it, we could maybe even work through taking out some of your own trash right now and show somebody what that example looks like. Okay.
We'll see where this goes.
But point is, where I'm going with that is, who was the last person that made you feel like garbage?
I have to really, I had a client recently that did that to me.
Okay. So that points you at something. So the last person who made you feel like garbage was a client that did something. What did it make you feel in your body?
I wanted to hit stop on the music and walk away. I was really frustrated at that point. And
frustrated is how you felt.
Yeah.
Okay. Frustrated is how you felt. Now, frustration and anger are armor, by the way. Okay. They're a secondary emotion. They're typically a secondary emotion from a shame, a something else, right? So I don't know all the context on what had happened, but did you see what just happened in 2 questions?
Yeah.
You identified the last time you felt like garbage, and you identified what it felt like, which is awareness. That's the very first step. But I wanted to give those questions because it's easy to sit here and say, oh, you just have to become aware you're carrying trash in your life. But most of it, by the way, is who-centered trash. Most of it is caused by a relationship, a person, sometime in our life that created these patterns, these conditions. It might be a trauma. It might be a loss. It might be just the way we were raised. It might be the environments that we grew up in. So the reality of it is to get to the core of our trash looks different for every single person. But if we can at least in a minimum start identifying the patterns of when we feel like garbage inside, then we can start to understand those moments that we need to pause and analyze them a little bit further. Okay. So again, I'll leave it to you. I'm not going to force it. But if you want to unpack that a little bit further, we can show somebody what that looks like, right? Because you've identified an emotion, you identified how it felt in your body, and you identified the last time it happened. Guess what? That's tied to a trigger that's tied to trash. And I would bet you that that same feeling or that same example has repeated itself in other environments, in patterns in your life, if you really force yourself to see it.
Yeah, I know it has, because I'm that guy that I'll resent things and hang on to it for a long time, and I can think of it 2 weeks later and I still get my blood boils. And it's not just that scenario. It's in little things. I'm that guy. So
but so am I, by the way. So am I. And so we all are. This is what I'm trying to highlight. We just don't talk about this stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so the reality of it is we just have to pause long enough to feel, because most of us, myself included, guess what would happen? I would feel something. I would go immediately to an intellectual narrative, and I would either shrink down in myself or I'd puff up. But shame moved in my body in 2 different ways. I'm loud, I talk fast. Do you know how many times somebody would lean over to me when we were in a meeting with a $2 billion client, and I'm sitting there literally like doing what I'm doing right now, and they're like, shh, Brian, you can't talk so loud, you can't talk so fast. And I'd shrink down in myself, right? I'd feel the need to retreat. I'd feel the need to protect myself. I wouldn't feel worthy. But my wife would ask me a question, and she'd be like, hey, babe, what are we gonna do this weekend? But my shame filter would cause me to hear it this way. Hey, babe, you've not done enough to be a good husband and father recently, so what are you gonna do this weekend to make up for it? I didn't shrink down in those cases. I was ready to fight. My defense came up. I got angry. I got frustrated. Right? And what would I do? I'd rattle off the 10 things I'd done in the last 4 days to show her I was a good husband and father. Point is, it was the exact same piece of trash, but it moved in my body differently and it moved in my world differently. And so the first thing we have to start to identify is, how do these things move in our body and how do they move in our world? Because that's when we learn to move through them. Now, I've learned in 2 paths, and I had to learn the hard way. I've only gotten to the fact that I believe the only way that we can truly connect is if we learn to take out our trash on a regular and consistent basis and do the deep work. But what that led me to was the ability to learn how to drop my armor on the fly by the understanding and acceptance that I no longer need to carry it. And so we can either take out our trash or drop our armor. Now, what I've learned is ultimately we want to take out our trash because it'll ultimately make our dropping the armor easier, more consistently, the more time we do it, because we won't live in that negative space and that negative damage space that we exist in. You just said 2 weeks later, I could get reignited by that. Do you know how much wasted time, energy, and resources that is inside of you?
A lot.
When if you could neutralize, diffuse it, release it, reconcile it, it would look different, right?
Yeah, I acknowledge that I have an issue with it, and I've known it for a long time, and you know I've been able to kind of like curb that a little bit, but still the like triggers, like things I think of, all of a sudden it pops back in my head, and I'm furious over something stupid, and I know it's something stupid, and the problem is it's just I'm ignorant, and not ignorant, but like more like I'm missing the right adjective, but anyways, well, I know I've acknowledged that I have the problem.
Keep in mind, you're getting trash thrown into your world every day, because every time you get triggered, it's adding trash into your can.
Yeah.
And the less time we don't pay attention to it, right? Like the more we continue to push it down, the more we create resistance in our lives, in our businesses, and our relationships. But the reality of it is that if we get ourselves to a point where we can acknowledge, yep, okay, there's nothing wrong with me. It's not my fault that they exist. It just becomes my responsibility to take it out. It's like at home in your trash can. You didn't fill the whole bin, but you might take out the trash for your family. I know I do. I'm the one who takes out the trash. Is it my fault that it's there? No. Is it my responsibility? Yeah, because it helps the whole, right? It helps everybody.
In an always challenging to choose category, business development, Jason Yormark is one of more than a dozen standout guests dropping serious wisdom on the show to help our guests achieve amazing outcomes in their businesses this year. In a world full of business leaders who talk but never seem to execute, Jason is a powerhouse that crushes that stereotype. On the show, Jason took me from his early days to the explosion of his business into a multi-million-dollar enterprise, sharing all the secret sauce along the way. Of course, there is no prescription for business success, but I thought Jason's appearance on the show was a great example of one with real, practical advice that could be executed on by experienced entrepreneurs and the recently initiated alike. Your winner of the Eggy Award in the Business Development category, from episode number 273, airing originally on August 25th, 2022, Jason Yormark.
Yeah, and also a couple things happen when you niche and you focus in a particular area. If you do it well and you treat your clients well and you deliver results, they're going to ask you, "Oh, do you do this other thing?" Or "We have this other need," and you can handle that in one of two ways. Like sometimes we'll stray a little bit from what we do if a client specifically asks us if it's within our wheelhouse. But more importantly, what I do is I build partnerships. I have partnerships with, a web agency or a PR agency or search marketing or SEO. And, if you build that relationship, now I could tap into these people and say, yeah, I've got somebody for you. I trust them. I worked with them. I could plug you right into that. And you're helping them, and then those partnerships then will return the favor. So even though you're not being everything to everybody, if you build trust with your clients, they're going to ask for these other things. And if you've got these partnerships in place, you can kind of plug them into these opportunities, and then you almost extend the opportunities that come your way. If you've got good partnerships, you're sending them leads, they're sending you leads, and it's kind of a win-win. So it can be a little bit uncomfortable up front, but if you want to succeed in 2022 and beyond, you're going to have to kind of really narrow what you do to make any sort of movement.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And I really like your thoughts about sort of collaboration or working with partners. I mean, really the I guess the evidence of being a great vendor, or a great provider for your client, so when your client comes to you and they ask you for something, your willingness to be honest with them and say, hey, that's not our wheelhouse. Yeah. And B, I've got a resource for you. Mm-hmm. Those two skills make you a tremendous partner for somebody. And so as a great vendor or a great, provider, those are amazing skills to have.
For sure.
So I wanted to sort of, I guess, lead off of this, in terms of your life history. Now we understand why you've started your business, why Specialistics does what it does, all that kind of stuff. But I wonder if we can now talk about sort of the early days to where we are today, and maybe put this even in the frame of your book, and talk about this, a $1 million business. How do we go from $0 to $1 million? And so maybe we can talk a little bit about what that path was like for you, and maybe we can extrapolate that for other people.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was the breaking point for me and being able to kind of finally get to where I wanted to. And there's a chapter in the book. It's probably my favorite chapter in the book. It's basically, creating a runway, because most of us don't have the resources and the ability to take significant risks. You've got kids, you've got bills, you need that steady paycheck, you need the benefits. So, taking a leap in entrepreneurship can be a lofty leap for most. So oftentimes, it's one of those things that kind of gets set aside and, maybe someday. So, and I had thought through that many times, and I knew if I was ever going to be able to take that leap, I needed to build a runway for myself. I wouldn't be able to just take a leap. So I knew I created a plan for myself. I think in my mind at the time it was like a 2-year plan. I'm like, all right, I'm going to create a brand, and I'm going to do some things on the side while I have jobs to kind of build some momentum that I hopefully can then slide into at some point. So, I built a brand. I started blogging. I started putting content out. I started trying to create awareness of my brand. It's a slog. It's a marathon. Like, it's competitive. I'm trying to get to the front page of Google for terms that relate to what I do. So I got to constantly put stuff out, taking on a few side hustle projects, and taking them on for less cost. It's like, I'm just starting out. People don't know me. I'm like, hey, normally I would charge this. I'll do it for free for 3 months if you agree to allow me to, have a portfolio piece that speaks and get a review from you. Like, so if you're not reliant on the business financially, you can take some heavy risks in helping build some momentum around. So you kind of put all these things in place. So I did that. And sure enough, within a year, the last job that I had didn't work out. I got let go and I was just fed up. I'm like, I'm done. The stability that I was always looking for just didn't exist. And I'm like, I'm just going to go for it. And because I had put that time in, because I had built a runway, because I had a couple clients, I wasn't jumping into something like overwhelmingly new. Oh, I got to create a brand and a logo and a website and I got to do this and that. And it's just like, it could be overwhelming. No, all that stuff was done. This train had already left the station. I jumped right into it. And the number one thing that came out of that, because of that, was it broke down my fear. Fear had really crippled me in the past around entrepreneurship, like fear of failing. How am I going to pay my bills? Like, what if I lose a client? Like, just this fear can just psychologically overpower you. And then the fear was gone mostly. And then my business took off because of it. So the combination of creating that runway, eliminating that fear, not letting it handcuff me, everything took off from there. I just had a different attitude about it, a different energy about it. And it didn't take long before it was bigger than me. A couple months in, I got to hire somebody, then I'm hiring somebody else, and success breeds success. Those foundational pieces really allowed me to kind of build something. And certainly, to your point, all the experience that I'd had throughout my life, I kind of peppered that into what I did, and certainly made mistakes, fail up, learn from those mistakes, but just a commitment to really doing things the right way. Not saying yes to everything, sticking to your guns about who you are and your core values. All of these things helped build a scalable business. I didn't grow as fast as maybe a lot of agencies do, but I grew at the right pace to allow me to continue to live my core principles and values, stay true to who we are and what we do, not say yes to everything. And that helped us kind of scale and grow at the right rate, and allowed us to be who we are and not, just take on everything, everywhere, every time. And that's basically been our recipe. I mean, if you look at our growth on a chart, it would probably be, slow and consistent and not like a hockey stick, but I'm okay with that because I've been able to build a lifestyle for myself that, it's freedom. I live my life the way that I want, how I want. I'm sure if I did things differently, we'd probably be bigger and make more money, but you get older in life and time starts to feel just as important as money. And for me, that's good enough. So, and I'm thrilled that I've been able to give that to others as well.
Yeah, no, I love that. And actually, one of the things, I mentioned at the top that we have a lot of things in common. And so, and so it's actually, like I told you, I'm very excited to have this conversation because there's so many things that you're saying that have worked for you that are the same way that I approached things. And I felt all these years wildly insecure about, felt like I was doing the wrong thing. So I love to hear it from somebody else, especially this idea of sort of, risk aversion and starting out, sort of slow and working on the side hustle. And actually in my career, I've been saved twice by that, which was I was freelancing at night and things like that and lost a job, but had my freelance to fall back on. And then years later, I went back to work for another agency, same thing, worked a few years and fell back out on my freelance career. To the point where my wife was like, what are we doing? Like, why do you keep restarting? Just do it. And we've been doing that ever since, right? Yeah. And so it's fun to hear sort of this trajectory. But there's a couple of things I wanted to unpack. And first of all, I wondered, you mentioned something about not saying yes to everything, and I wanted to ask you about that concept, and just see if, in your experience, if maybe it came out of maturity. Like, is that something that you learned being an older person as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that wasn't just some revelation. I think, and look, I'm not naive. When you're just starting a business, you're going to say yes to some things, but just out of necessity, and that's okay. And I think that's really where my learnings and education came, is because, as you get older, or as you have more experiences, your instincts become pretty solid. And I think, I can think every client opportunity that we've worked on that didn't work out, I can tie it back to the original conversation I had with them and honestly say, the red flags went off. Like I knew to a certain extent that there's something doesn't feel right about this. But I'm going to give it a shot because, we're new and we need the experience. So early on, those red flags existed. I could feel them for whatever reason. The professional chemistry isn't there. I felt like, I don't know if that they're going to treat my team really well. Their product really sucks. It's not, it's nothing special about it. Good marketing doesn't fix crappy products. So I'm like, these are the kinds of things, or they had realistic expectations. Like, you're going to make me a millionaire in a month. I'm like, no, like nobody can do that. Or like, they looked at your pricing. They're like, well, that's a little bit more expensive than we were like that. Like all these things are red flags. Today, if any of those things fire off, I'm like, I'm sorry, this isn't a good fit. Like I'm literally that black and white about it. Cause I know it 99% of the time, it's not going to end well. It's not worth it for the 1% that it might. So we've reached a maturity level with the business that I can do that. I can afford to say no. But in those early stages, those flags raised, but I'm like, oh, I got to go for it. They never worked out. And I learned through that, right? Client slips through, treats my team like crap. I'm like, nope, you're fired. I cannot afford to have people treat my team like crap. Not going to have it. Or 2 months in, they're like, why don't I have 6-figure sales? I'm like, we've been working 2 months with you. And the first month was onboarding. So it's like, nope, this isn't going to work. You clearly don't feel good about this and what you're investing in it. So it's not worth it. It's exhausting to you as a business owner. It's exhausting to your team. So you just learn to eventually get to a place where you hope that you reach a threshold of success that you can comfortably say no. And it's not going to be comfortable. I mean, it's kind of like over time it gets more comfortable, but you kind of have to force yourself to just get to a point where it's pretty black and white. Trust your instincts, put things in place. Like one of the best things that we ever did was the evolution of our contact form on our website, right? So everybody that comes to us that's interested, they don't call. They fill out a form on our website and then we follow up. Over time, I've learned how to evolve the methodology that we've used on our contact form to lessen the amount of spam and unqualified leads. So now we've really gotten into a rhythm where, I don't get as many leads, but the ones that I get, there's a 90% chance that they're qualified. Whereas before it was like 30, 40. So you start to put things in place from a technology standpoint, from a process standpoint. You start to gain efficiencies. You're not wasting time on opportunities that don't make sense for you, so that by the time that you're actually getting on the call with them, there's a much higher probability that it's a good fit. They've already been vetted, and you're not wasting your time on the phone with them. So we've really gotten into a pretty sweet spot around that and figured out those things. But to your point, it doesn't happen overnight. I don't care how many books you read. I don't care how much you listen to my podcast or anybody's podcast. We can tell you all of these things, but there's a lot of weight that goes into just experiencing these things and learning from what works and what doesn't for yourself, and then iterating off of that.
Yeah, no, it's funny because as we talk about just sort of our mutual sort of path into entrepreneurship, which was sort of this slow burn, working for other people, and then ultimately arriving. And then even when we did arrive, there's, I've got to make sure I've got enough money for the family. So I'm going to just take some side work, and then, like sort of this easing into it. But you mentioned before that your growth might be a little bit slow and unlike the hockey stick. But I wondered if you could talk, about, sort of your career began as sort of risk aversion, like this is a simple way to get in. Yeah. However, I think part of finding success is learning to be more tolerant of risks. And I think sort of what you were just describing, which is, in this scenario that we were just discussing, it was being able to say no. Yeah. It wasn't, I'm curious if it was really about money and financial stability as much as it was about, knowing what was a good fit and becoming more willing to take a risk and just say, no, this isn't good. Sort of, I guess, almost put faith in the concept that somebody better is going to come along. And so I wonder if that is, again, maturity, or if this is part of that process, just as you do the work and you spend time in your business, if you can actually evolve to become more, tolerant of risk.
Yeah, it's interesting for me. I think one of the faults that I had as a business owner is that I was very much risk aversion, especially financially, because I always wanted to make sure that I had a significant nest egg to fall back on, because I've been in the agency game long enough to know that there are hills and valleys to this game. I think like right now, I'm not sure when this will publish, but we're in the middle of a recession. It's impacting us. It's impacting a lot of agencies. It's unavoidable. And I want to make sure that I have the resources to kind of see through those challenging times. And I did that to a fault. I think that it prohibited me from making bigger moves or investing more significantly. And I think that contributed to slower growth. It wasn't until, again, running the business for a certain amount of time and realizing, if, I got to decide who we want to be, do we want to be, when you look at an agency or a business, I think there's different levels of success. Like you reach certain thresholds. And for me, like I wanted to hit being that $1 million agency. That was always kind of like a threshold that I wanted to hit. And it was just like, I was getting close, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. This constant back and forth. And I realized, part of the equation was basically, I wasn't making bigger moves, taking a little bit more risk, investing more money in advertising, or maybe hiring more than what we needed to accommodate future growth instead of just reacting. So it was these kinds of things that I finally realized, I got to take some bigger leaps here, because I'm doing the business and my team a disservice by being overly risk aversion. For the most part, that move was a good one. It allowed us to kind of break through that barrier, and it's allowed me to be a little bit more balanced business owner in terms of not kind of being too extreme about how I take risks. So that's definitely something that I learned over time. I don't think that that's one of the things that, again, you read a book or you listen to a podcast and you can just instantly be risk averse or less risk averse. I think it's just everybody's a little bit different in terms of what their blind spots are. I think the best thing that you can do is to just approach things from I don't know everything. I don't know everything. I realize that. Hire people that are better than me. Surround myself with mentors and people that you trust that can help you learn and grow and think differently outside of your own kind of lane. If you take that approach, then you're going to work through anything. So I think that's really just the mentality that you have to have if you want to build a long-term business.
Hey, what's up? It's Mike. When it comes to the category of finance, it's always hard to determine the winner for the Eggy Award each year. We usually do 4 or 5 really good interviews with financial planners, managers, anyone in this world altogether. And this year, the winner in the finance category is Arya Scheinbein, and he's worked with some of the top venture capitalists, hedge funds, banks. He's even taken it to the Amazon selling market. He's got a huge e-commerce enterprise, and he has over 20 years experience in the financial service industries, including senior positions in-house, private equity firms, and hedge funds. So this year, for the category of finance for the Eggy's Award, here's Arya Scheinbein.
I wonder, so in our sort of prior conversation, we were talking a little bit about how different financial planners are stuck sort of in their ecosystem or in their vertical, as you described it. But I wondered, and this is maybe just to keep all those certified financial planners from getting too pissy with us, because we like to have them on the show. But is there such a thing as investing through a company like that? Let's say you use a Charles Schwab or a whomever, choose your company. Is there such a thing as that being a good wealth decision? Can you grow wealth and can you come out with a good outcome that, is great and you will be totally satisfied and all that stuff using their sort of vertical model versus the sort of DIY approach? And I think we're sort of, it seems like on this call, we're sort of advocating for DIY. I just want to sort of put to bed, are all those people bad? Are you in real trouble if you've invested through Charles Schwab or any of those companies?
100%. So I would say you are not in real trouble at all, right? So the DIY, the way I think about DIY is know yourself. So most people, there's no, if you want to play in the stock, right? Let's call it the public markets. So stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, all these things. There's no true set it and forget it outside of hey, I'm going to monthly auto invest in the S&P 500, right? That's as low touch as it's ever going to get. You're going to dollar cost average every month, month after month, or week after week. You are going to contribute X dollars to an S&P 500 index. And over time, stocks have historically gone up, right? So if you take like a 100-year period, you're looking at an 8% return. But if you take a much smaller window, like a 10-year, the last 10 years, you're probably up closer to like 14, 15, 16. I mean, last year it was a 23 to 27% on the S&P 500. This year's been a really rocky road, but 21 was a good year. 19 was a good year. So they've outperformed this 8%, average. The 8% is really like over like the last 100, 150 years or so. So if you invest in Schwab, so Schwab is a little bit more of a do-it-yourself anyway platform, but they have like advisors. You are in totally fine shape in the sense that my vision is you should go in and have the conversation and just be knowledgeable, so that when they're telling you this and this and this, it's not the only thing. It could be you can ask the question and not feel like an idiot, or you can say, hey, I understand you want me in this mutual fund, but I think the fees are a little bit high. Don't you agree that maybe just going in the S&P 500 may be just as good? And it's going to lower my fees from a 0.5 percentage point to 0.3%. And then you can have a conversation and they'll be like, oh, this guy actually pays attention to these things, and maybe even give you better advice. At the same time, it doesn't preclude you. One doesn't preclude you from the other, right? Like my money is at Schwab, my money is at Fidelity, but I also have real estate and I also have crypto and I also am invested in businesses. And, granted, depending on how much money you've accumulated, you have these different abilities. But if you want to stay in one vertical only, right? You're like, I don't have time for this and I just need to listen to someone. You want to find someone who, whatever that vertical is, they at least can point you in other places of that vertical. Meaning, if you have someone at whatever, Edward Jones, and they're like, this is your stock and bond portfolio. And you say to them, okay, I would like some exposure to real estate, that they don't try and talk you out of it, that they at least are open to saying, hey, how does that fit? So I'm going to break this down, because in terms of this wealth, right, you can create wealth in anything. But part of it goes to how active you want to get, how passive you want to get, and what you're actually trying to accomplish. So like when I invest in real estate today, I am not looking to knock it out of the park with like a 10x my money over the next 5 years. Like I don't use that asset class as that type of vehicle. Real estate that I'm looking for is cash flowing properties that are either well occupied or pretty close to well occupied, that we can improve them and then get additional cash flow from them. And so it's much more of an income producing. And then ultimately, like, yeah, there's value appreciation in there, and there's potential ways to get your money out without actually selling, things like refinancing, right? So think of your home mortgage. You buy a home for $500,000. You have a $250,000 mortgage. 5 years later, the value is, let's just say, $600,000, and your mortgage is down to $200,000. So the gap between the value of the home and the loan is what we call the equity. So when you bought the home, it was $500,000 to $250,000. Your equity was $250,000. Now it's $600,000 to $200,000. Your equity now is $300,000. Well, you can tap into that money today by getting a new loan. You go to the bank and you're like, hey, I want to refinance my loan. Even though I have 20 years left on my 30-year mortgage, or 25 left on my 30-year, the bank will gladly give you that money. And instead of taking a $200,000 loan, which is all you have left, you can go back and take $250,000 again. But now you have $50,000 of excess cash that you can invest in something else. And there's no taxable gain on that $50,000. And so you haven't like changed anything other than you've taken some of the equity value out of your home, right? And so you want people who at least can educate you on this and give you ideas of what to do with it. And it may be going to the guy at Edward Jones. It may be, he has a mortgage broker who can refinance the loan for you. Maybe he doesn't, but you want to at least feel educated yourself so that you're not beholden to the idea that this guy or gal is just totally controlling the narrative.
Well, and I think that makes a lot of sense, especially, if you put it in the perspective of other things we do, let's say like car repairs, right? Like when you take your car into the shop and then it comes out looking like it did when you left, like you kind of feel robbed, right? I just gave you $2,000, but it looks just like the car I brought in. But if you had educated yourself a little bit and you know what the problem is and all that stuff, then you could say, okay, well, it's fair. What you told me, what you told me or what you diagnosed versus what I told you, like we're kind of in the same place. I understand it costs this much money to fix that kind of problem. Just by having a little foundational knowledge in the first place, or understanding what's wrong with your car, you can take it to a professional and let the professional do the job, but then you feel better about it, right? You have a better attitude about it. And so I wonder then if we're going to just sort of keep this conversation going and talking about sort of DIY, right? I mean, you could fix your own car or you can go to a professional, right? So maybe not so much anymore. Maybe you can't fix a car now, but there was a time when you could fix a car. Is the cost, I guess, of learning. So if we're talking about just, trying to maximize our wealth and get the most out of it, are the costs associated with learning something, right? The mistakes we'll make as an individual in a DIY sense, are those going to be outweighed by the fees and the things we pay in a more structured, if we go to a Charles Schwab to have them do our work or do our financial planning? I mean, would it make sense to gain the knowledge and do our best, or are we actually going to make more mistakes or not know the ins and outs and end up costing ourselves more?
So I think that's a fair question. And I think again, going back to what I said earlier, in that's personal, right? So there are so many different things that drive this, in the sense, like, if you are generally a fearful person, if you're more afraid of the mistake than you are afraid of the education, then it may be a tough kind of thing to kind of consider. But I think if you carve out a small amount of money, like, it all depends on your personal portfolio. But let's just say you carve out 10%, 5%, whatever it is, and you effectively, quote unquote, gamble it. And when I say gamble it, I really don't mean gamble it, but I mean test it, learn it, work it, right? Like, you'll learn so much more if you are personally investing $1,000 or $5,000 versus just handing it off. Now, the person who's thinking, well, I don't have the time for that, I don't have the interest for that, then that person probably, it's not about losing the $5,000 or the $1,000 anymore, making their mistakes. It's that they don't want to trade the time and they don't have the interest. And that's okay. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. The only thing that you should know is when you go to, and Schwab is a much more DIY kind of model to begin with. But most of these people, like, they're going to give you very simple things, and they're going to tell you, okay, how much money do you spend a year? Okay, you spend $100,000 a year. That's your cost of living. And for the time being, we're going to leave inflation out of the equation. And we're going to say, okay, now we need to kind of get you to the goal line. Well, what is that goal line, right? Like we talked about in the beginning, what's this destination? Well, if you multiply the $100,000 by 25 times, you're going to come up with a number that's $2.5 million. So why did I pick 25 times? Well, because there's, in the financial planning industry, there's this concept of the 4% rule, which basically says, if I have a pot of money that's earning some rate of return, if I pull out 4% of it a year, it should last a good 30 years, that pot. And so a lot of times what these planners are just going to tell you is like, okay, you need to get to $2.5 million of accumulated assets. How'd they do that? They worked with you to come up with this $100,000 a year expense line. And then they multiply by 25, and they kind of use this rule of 4%, which is not a bad thing. And this is like, fundamentally, like, if anybody asks me, like, this is what I'm going to teach them day one. This is like one of the first steps in Future Fund. I kind of really like dumb down, because I think the problem is a lot of people, if I ask you how much it costs to live today, they don't necessarily know the $100,000 number. And because they don't want to know the number, if they're afraid I'm going to tell them the number should be higher, should be less, like I'm going to tell them they should be living on 70,000. And like, I'm indifferent to what how they want to live. But so like, there's tools, there's spreadsheets, it's all the stuff that I give you. And the idea is just like, get you comfortable with knowing what it is, so that then you can get to your $2.5 million number, whatever the number is for you, right? And then you can start to back things out of it. Meaning, if you or your spouse works for the state and you're going to have an actual pension fund, well, the $2.5 million number came off of this $100,000 number we said. But if you know you're going to get $25,000 a year in income from your pension fund, hypothetically, well, now really all we need to do is take that 100,000 less 25, which is 75,000, multiply that by 25, and say, okay, what is that number? Right. And I'm not going to do public math because I'll screw it up, but 75,000 times 25, it's some number that's less than $2.5 million. Right. And ultimately, then your guidance should be somewhat different. Right. And this is what a planner is going to do. This is not like, and I'm not knocking their role, but if you at least understand this going in and you don't want to spend any of the time or you don't want to do any of it yourself, that's cool. I just think like, if you go, like to your point, right? Like if you go to a car mechanic or anywhere else, if you really have no idea what is fair and what the other person's doing, yeah, ignorance is bliss sometimes, but it probably is a little bit better. And most people have this FOMO. Most people have this fear of missing out where their neighbor is talking about this stock, their neighbor is talking about this crypto, their neighbor is talking about this real estate, or their dentist, or who the heck knows what, the person bagging their groceries for all I know, right, is telling them all this stuff. And then they instinctively are like, oh, I'm going to go do this. And then they trip up and they maybe make a mistake because they got half a piece of information, and had they invested the time in themselves to learn it, they probably would have been in a better place. And the FOMO just drove the bus instead of like education.
This category is another one of those that is always very difficult to pin down. Business leadership can mean a lot of things to a lot of different people, and the broad spectrum of business leaders who shared their stories on the show this year made this an incredibly difficult choice. Simon Severino is the founder of Strategy Sprints, a business thought leader, financial wizard, and master of systematizing organizations. His Strategy Sprints methodology has a record of doubling revenue for participants in just 90 days, utilizing carefully crafted weekly sprints. On the show, Simon shared his methodology in a comprehensive and easy-to-follow way that allows all business leaders to step into their businesses and take charge in new ways, building confidence and better relationships along the way. His message really resonated with me and no doubt weighed heavily in our decision to nominate him for an Eggy Award. From February 3rd, 2022, episode number 245, your Eggy Award winner in the business leadership category, the very impactful Simon Severino. I wanted to maybe get into next, just sort of talking a little bit about your process. And I know one of the things that you guys do, and I mean, it's in the name of the business, is sprints. And for a lot of people who aren't familiar with sprints, they're really well known for being an aspect of, more agile companies or technology type companies. They use it in software development and other things like that. But I wanted to talk to you first of all about sprints and have you just sort of explain to the audience, what sprints are as you use them. And then also, are they, can you use them if you're outside of the software business? Do they work in, traditional types of businesses as well?
Sure. So the smallest sprint is like the Pomodoro technique. You do something, then you have a break, then you do something, then you have a break, and you do something, then there's a break. We use weekly sprints. They are a little bit bigger, and they are about how you run a company. And so how do you run a company with this technique of doing something and then doing nothing and then doing something and then doing nothing? So the first thing is you divide work in time. So you say, okay, for us, 7 days is one sprint. And we always do 12 sprints in a cycle. So it's 3 months, 3 goals, 3 numbers that we measure every 7 days. And every week has one bottleneck that we need to solve. For example, let's say you are an agency and say, okay, what do you want to achieve in 3 months? A typical client of us says, okay, I want to double my revenue, I want to reduce my costs, and I want to have happier clients. All right, let's define it. What does happier mean? Will they refer 3 more people per week to you? Will they answer from 1 to 10 that they are going to refer to you? Will they answer from 1 to 10 that they are happy and 10 is happiest? So we define it and then we create a dashboard for these 3 numbers. And those numbers, you will have them in front of you, real-time dashboard. That's really what the strategy sprints method is about. And you will always see what is current, what is target, what's the gap. So the whole team is aligned. And now you're like a basketball team. Because a basketball team always knows, all right, this is what we want. We want the ball to get in there and we want to score. And we know exactly who's doing what, right? You're on the right side, I'm on the left side, you're in front, I'm back. That's what we do, right? Let's do it. And so if you create these circumstances, now every team becomes a high performance team. That's just from my 20 years of seeing many projects that don't work and some projects that work. And I just collected the single elements that really work and put them together in the strategy sprints method. So the first thing is very clear, 3 goals and 3 numbers, real time, always visually in front of you. Are you winning? Are you not winning? What's next? Then it's aligning the team. We have one person, the business owner, one person from operations, one from marketing, one from sales. That's the sprint team. And then they get a sprint coach 24/7 for 90 days. That's like Spider-Man and his friend. You know, Spider-Man is in action. And I love the new movie where Spider-Man is super young and super excited. And he's fighting all the time, right, in action. And he has no time to think. And so he says, but he has his friend who is the guy in the chair. And he asks him, hey, should I kick the left door or the right door? And his friend says, give me a second. Kick the left door. So that's what a sprint coach is. It's the guy in the chair. We are your guy in the chair. You are in action. You don't have time to analyze. And we help you. We build the blueprints. We make it easy for you so that you can take your 6, 7, 8, 9 decisions per day and take them in a way that move you really forward. And that's why they can double revenue, because they don't have to stop and analyze and overthink. They can stay in action and move the ball forward.
Okay. So in the framework of the, strategy sprints methodology, so can we talk just a little bit more about the goal setting component? So obviously, I mean, one of the big pitches that you guys put out there is this W revenue in 90 days sort of metric. But I mean, what other types of goals should people be setting? And the reason I'm asking is it's more, or what I'm curious about, I guess, is this, concept of maybe biting off too much or not biting off enough, and then how you sort of adapt with sprints. So if you've bitten off too much, can you adjust and so on?
If I had to decide, I have goals or I have a process, I would always go for process. Because if you have a goal and then everything changes, what's good about that goal? Nothing. So pre-pandemic, I had goals of being on 300 stages per year. Well, didn't happen. The goal doesn't help me at all. But if I have a process of goal setting, which is helpful, then, okay, pandemic wipes away all my stages. All right, but I have a process to orient, adapt, and move forward. That's why process is so much more important than goals. And the process, I mean, how you set up goals, how you visualize the progress, and how you learn every 7 days from action. So it's action, learning, new action, learning, new action, learning, new action. That's the important loop. And that needs to be real time, latest every 7 days. One problem that I see out there is people get those information every month. So for example, if I ask right now the listeners, this week, how many unique visitors were on your website? How many of them want to really work with you? And how many of them should your team call? 90% of the people listening right now cannot answer that. If you cannot answer that, you are flying blind. What the hell are you doing? This is the all important thing. Who wants work from you? And who is calling them? So for example, that's a typical lack of marketing numbers. And even the best teams, we are working with the coolest teams in San Francisco, in Singapore, in London. Even the coolest teams, I ask them this simple question and they say, well, we'll get this information in 1 month from our CRM. So why do you even use a CRM if it doesn't give the info right now, right? You don't have to take these traditions from 1984 and move them forward, where you would take 1 decision per month. We are in 2022. You take 8 decisions per day, and you want to take decisions based on your reality. Your reality is how many people were on the website, how many people want something from you right now, and who is going to call them, and how do you convert them into a project, and how do you get out of the way so that you can get more projects in.
Yeah, no, I love that. Well, and I really love this process over goal idea. I have heard, we've been doing the show for a long time. We've interviewed more than 200 people for this show, and goals come up all the time, right? You've got to set a goal. You have to know where you're going, so this idea of flying blind, right? Oh, I'm not flying blind. I have a goal. But I think this concept of putting process ahead of the goal is actually, I mean, it's pretty innovative, and it's actually the first time I've heard that. So thanks so much for that. I wanted to add on to that, or sort of, pivot off of it with the trying to understand, how do you deal with these blockers? And what I'm taking from what you just said. So this idea, you ask this simple question: how many people are coming to your website, and how many of those people want to do business with you? So, and like you said, most people can't answer that. So for me, all of a sudden in my head, I'm going, okay, well, I was on a track, which was, figure out how to talk to these people. Now I've been told I don't know who they are, and I recognize that I don't know who these people are. And now I'm blocked. Now I can't move forward. Now I need to go and dig in the trenches and get into Google Analytics and see if I can come up with a number. And now I'm off track. So how does the sprint process sort of adapt, I guess, when you get off the rails?
So 12 times per week, we have the chance to course correct if we would be off rail. That's why it works, because when you have 12 times the chance to course correct, it's a high probability that you will get it right. That's why we measure and adapt so often. So in this case, you would say, okay, I don't know. Well, that's the task for the next 4 hours is to install something that tells you exactly that. And it doesn't take more than 30 minutes to do it. It's a zap in Zapier, and it sends to your whatever, to your Slack or to your email. It says, this person was on your website and wants something. It costs $9. It takes us half an hour to implement on your website. And it's just the first idea that comes to my mind. So all these things are pretty simple. All the strategies and tactics that we implement are very simple. You just need to do them. And they are completely tool agnostic. Nobody needs to upgrade any software. Well, I just said Zapier. Yeah, but it's not really complicated software. It's just something that tells you something is going on.
Right. And then this is the value of the coach, right? Is the coach is there to give you that tactical advice. So if you don't know how to do it, which is why you haven't been tracking these people, then it would be the responsibility of the coach to, I guess, sort of give you some direction on that front.
We have 274 tactics, which are really blueprints, swipe copies, very practical templates. And we have 3 strategies that we implement and 3 habits, because a tool with a fool is still a fool. A fool with a tool is still a fool. Like, you can have the best blueprint, but it's not based on the right strategy, then it's just not working. So that's why we start with strategies, and we have 3 strategies. One is increasing by 25% the frequency of your sales by reducing the sales time. The second one is increasing by 25% your conversion rate with the same amount of leads. And the third one is increasing by 25% the amount that you can charge for your offer. And that's what we achieve in 90 days. And if you compound those 3 plus 25%, it makes plus 99% because they compound. And now you have doubled your revenue, and it's not even hard. The only thing is just to do it. And so to do it, that's where the coach comes in, because they give you the confidence to trust really the process. Because if you do it alone, you go, what if this doesn't work? No, let me start 4 other things in case this doesn't work. But if you have a coach who says, hey, I did this 100 times, this is what you do this week, then you can go, okay, I trust the process. Let me trust the process. I jump into it. And that's the basic dynamic of every teacher relationship, right? And of every, evolution and in exploration. So these are the 3 strategies. And with these 3 strategies, we check against every project or activity. Does it increase frequency? No. Okay. Does it increase the price? No. Does it increase the conversion rate? No. Okay. Why are we doing it? That's how we focus. For these 90 days, we will get one thing doubled. Can be one product, one offer, or one market. We will just improve every single part of that, from the beginning stage, awareness, to engagement, to making them ready, to closing the deal, to retaining.
For the category of authors on the Eggy Award this year, we have Albert Flynn de Silver. Albert is an award-winning, internationally published writer. He's a TEDx speaker and a workshop leader known for his merging of creative writing with the practice of mindfulness meditation. We had a really cool conversation with him, and I am looking forward to share this clip with you. So for this year's Eggy's Award winner for the category of author, here is Albert Flynn De Silver.
I'm kind of in the same position. I know nothing about meditation, and I've done a little YouTube video research, but nothing more than that. And I've tried meditating a few times, but I'm kind of in a similar spot as you as far as that goes. And so I'm actually kind of interested to hear how this part of your life, changed things for you, how meditation helped.
Yeah, because I was so confused about it that when we were driving by and there was a sign that said Spirit Rock Meditation Center, I thought it said Mediation Center. I was like, wait, what's meditation? Medium. Anyways, so I go to this, they had these Monday night sitting groups with this guy, Jack Cornfield, who's now like a mega star in the meditation world. And, this was 25 years ago. And I go to this sitting group and we just sit there in silence, right? And which is a novelty to me because I'm used to being in my head and always moving. But I notice it feels really good to be still and to be turning inward and to be contemplating loving myself, and breathing, focusing on breathing. These are all like total novelties to me. And on top of it, he's reading a lot of poetry. And so then I just all of a sudden I get this intersection between creativity and poetry and language and mindfulness and stillness and waking up to like our full potential through contemplation, through reflection, through compassion, and all of that. And so that's kind of where I started to get into it. So I started going, I went to that first Monday night thing, and then I started going to, they had these day-long programs with various teachers, and I just got heavy into it from there. And then, eventually I found myself on long retreats, silent retreats and so forth. And it totally helped me transcend these, the self-limiting self-beliefs I had, about like whether I could be an artist or whether I could be an entrepreneur or whether I could make enough money to live or whether I could do anything really. And it really just broadened my whole perspective.
Yeah, no, I really like that story. It's interesting too. I mean, obviously Jack Cornfield is like the OG now, back then he was probably up and coming a little bit, but I mean, he's like the guy now. And, it's interesting because I guess I've never really thought about it, but I mean, when you're doing creative work, whether that's drawing, painting, writing, whatever it is you're doing, I mean, it almost is a little meditative, just sort of by its very nature, right? I mean, you're focused in on this thing that you're doing, you're drawing from inside your thoughts or whatever, and, basically laying it out in sort of a, printed or written or drawn form or whatever. And so I guess it's funny because it's maybe a more obvious connection than I had seen before. So I appreciate you sharing that.
Well, yeah, exactly. It's so true. And, but there's still like, I went to all these academic programs, in creativity, and, the mind still can get super locked into various ideas and, the whole like creative MFA program is revolved around critique seminars and critiquing work, which is great, right? Because it's all about improvement. And yet it's also like one has to be careful because there can be this over critiquing, right? The mind can get overly involved, can over intellectualize things rather than grounding in like the pure spirit of creativity and the pure spirit of connectivity. And
that was actually going to be one of my questions for you was in the writing process, when should you take critique and when should you share your work with other people? Because I've dabbled in a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but I never want to hit publish on the blog. I never want to actually kind of like, put it out there and see what kind of feedback comes back. And in your personal writing process, do you have like that person that you just say, hey, read this, give me some feedback before you hit the publish button, or do you actually just go and make edits later?
It sort of depends on the piece, right? but I really want to reflect on your sensibility for it, because it's very vulnerable, right? To share work. You know, you have this inner idea, this inner experience that is coming from within you, and to express it out, to get it out, to publish it on a blog, for example, or anywhere for that matter, it's a little harrowing on some level, right? And so I think it is, you know, the whole editing thing is a big topic, but I think what's important is to write for yourself, you know, to write your truth, to tell the truth of what's really going on for you in your story, and how you think about things, what your perspective is on things, and then to balance that out with getting feedback from what I usually go first to what I call my trusted readers. And those are people who I trust are gonna hold me with love and support and compassion, you know, and not so much kind of try and jostle in for their intellectual opinion so much, exactly. Right? Yeah. And then I kind of try and pace myself with that. And then after getting some trusted readers, and I'll kind of cast further out to some professional editors, because I can't see it myself. I can't see all the editing and all the little flaws that are happening in any given piece of writing.
Yeah. I think all artists kind of have to deal with whatever format, whether it's writing, whether it's a musician, whether it's Ryan, your graphic design work. If you look in the back of his wall there, that's some of his work there. But just putting that out in front of the world and saying, hey, this is what I do. Do you want to, you know, be a part of it? That's kind of very intimidating. And it's very intimidating. And I think, like with writing, it's kind of like if I was doing a research piece on a specific topic, I have no problem with doing like the research. This is my findings. This is what, you know, I came to a conclusion of. But when it comes to like writing, you know, personal, authentic, like stuff that gets a little deeper, I think that's where writing kind of takes the next step. And I think it kind of is another, you know, instead of just, you know, creating, I'm a DJ, instead of just creating a DJ mix and putting it out there to the world, writing a book for me is a lot more, you know, like that's really a little too personal. And like, you know, how do you get over that fear? How do you get over that level of like, do I really want to put myself into this? Do I really want to start this blog? This podcast was really hard because I like doing conversations like this and getting authentic with people is tough for me. I don't know about Ryan. He might just take to it naturally, but I didn't want to necessarily, I had a hard time starting this. And as it's evolved, I've gotten more comfortable with it. The video was a whole element I had a problem with. But I mean, I'm just kind of curious about like what there's, I don't know, like how do you get over that fear? How do you get over that block of like getting too personal with people, or like sharing your actual thoughts and being in the public spotlight?
Can I just add real quick before you start jumping into that? I just want to add sort of as this creative journey, right? Because like Mike was saying, so his background is he's a club DJ. He performs in front of, hundreds, thousands of people. He plays his music in front of everybody.
I love it. And
for me, like that would be wildly nerve wracking, right? I mean, I don't know if that's how you feel about that, Albert, too. But so what I think Mike is talking about here is I think that there's sort of a level of comfort in your creative process, right? So he pointed out these couple of illustrations I've got on my back wall here, which are a couple of things that I've done sort of recently. And I've just recently opened an online store where I'm selling some artwork and things like that, right? I'm a 20-year advertising veteran, and I've been running a marketing agency for, 2 decades in one form or another. And I have no problem whatsoever writing a blog, sticking it out in front of somebody, creating a logo for a big, giant corporation, preparing websites or building materials for, multinational organizations, whatever, no problem.
Sure.
But when it came down to laying myself out there as an artist, which is funny because I've been drawing and stuff since I was a child, but my identity was never wrapped up in my artisticness. Rather, it was done more. My identity was more involved with my role as a creative director in an ad agency, for example. And so I think part of what Mike's tiptoeing around or trying to uncover is sort of, first of all, how we see ourselves, right? And how we define our identities. And then B, how we share either the identity we have or the identity we want with other people. And, for me, in my experience, just to reflect back Mike's comments about the podcast, I don't like being on camera. I don't like speaking on mic. I hate my voice. I hate, I have all the things that everybody has. And so, but I knew that if we were going to try and establish ourselves as experts in our space, and we were going to try and have a voice that was valuable for people who listen to the show and that sort of thing, that it was important that I just kind of bite the bullet and do it, right? Like it was going to suck and I know it, and I don't like it and it's uncomfortable, but I'm going to do it anyway, right? And I think that there's a place that you have to get to, and I'm kind of experiencing that now with this, art career, which is this, I'm having to put myself out there. And as a person who lives in a business that all we do is critique people all day, like I'm not afraid of hearing feedback. I'm not afraid of getting a critique, right? But there's something about my identity that's wrapped up in what I do for work versus what I could be as a person, right? And so I don't know, Mike, if I've totally slaughtered your thoughts, but that's kind of I think it's got a little bit about sort of exposing your belly to the world.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page, and I think it comes down to the mode that you're putting out there. And I guess what I was getting at is just the writing process seems to be so much more. I guess it really depends on the topic and what you're discussing and your piece of work at the time. Like you said, when you're working for a client, it's entirely different than when it's tied personally to your personal thoughts about a personal thing.
Yeah, right.
Well, yeah, you got it. Part of the analogy, Mike, when you said, so you're a DJ, you can get up there and you can create these playlists and share them with hundreds or thousands of people. But what if you were writing a song and it was your song that you're writing, and you had to sit up on a stage solo with the acoustic guitar, or maybe it was an electric guitar or whatever, and belt it out to a crowd? Like that would be different, right?
Yeah. I do this mix series called Anything Goes, and it's called that because I'll play anything that's kind of like might work with another song that you wouldn't think about or this or that. And every time I put one of those out, it's kind of like I'm judging myself really hard because it's like a creative piece of work that my peers are listening to, it's a different thing versus like if I'm just doing a quick mix show for a radio station or something, that doesn't really mean as much versus a creative piece of work that I put out to be consumed. I don't know. I think like authors probably deal with similar kind of thoughts all the time.
Oh yeah. Well, you just nailed it. Like self-judgment, right? So self-judgment and what Ryan was saying about identity, like how wrapped up are we in our identity of that? So it's one thing to be, sort of rejected by a literary magazine, and then it's a totally different thing to be rejected by maybe a corporate client for some copy work.
Yeah. And it seems like too what you were outlining with the idea that people, or like when you're rolling out new writing, for example, maybe it's a new book or an article or something, that in your process, Albert, you share it first with those close readers, the people who aren't out to harm you. They mean you authentic love and respect. Maybe they like it, maybe they don't, but at least their feedback is coming from a good spot, right? They're not just out there to get you, which is all over the internet these days.
Yeah.
So this is maybe how you're hedging your bets a little bit, right? You can start with somebody that's a little closer to you so that you can do that. And I have that in my wife and my friends. Mike has that in his friends or his peer group in DJ land.
Sure.
And, and then that sort of greater exposure, right? Where, like I say, we're sort of showing our underbelly to people and you're actually exposing yourself in front of people. And, I guess the broader world, is where things maybe get a little hairy.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
Hey, I wanted to ask you about how meditation works in your writing process. Like, do you usually start a writing session with a meditation session and then kind of go from there? Does it kind of prep you to get in the flow state or that effect?
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's the I wrote a whole book about this, and the meditations always come before the writing exercises. I think it's really powerful to write from that place of not knowing, that place of quote spacious awareness, or that place of stillness, where you can have more access to what I call the creative field. That's not always how I do it, honestly. Sometimes when I'm in a project, like when I'm working on a novel project or any kind of writing project, I'm totally immersed in the story. I'm on the path, and I'm just like, I'm waking up in the morning pretty early, and I'm like, I want to reconnect with the story. And my mind is kind of humming with some ideas and edits and changes I can make and additions and so forth. And so I'll go right to the notebook, or I'll go right to the laptop and start working on that. And then I'll probably save my meditation time for later in the afternoon or the evening. However, if I'm in between writing sessions or books or projects, I will, meditate first, and to get back into that story mode or that poetry mode or whatever it is. And anytime I'm ever stuck, that's directly where I go. I go to stillness and I go to silence, because I can't work it out in my head. Like, there's no thinking myself out of my doubt, my fear, my shame, whatever it is, it's kind of getting in the way of accessing that creativity.
I like that. I can't tell you how many times I've been stuck on a project, or you get to like a blocker, and I do software kind of on the side. I'm just getting into it.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll get to a point where you're just hitting a brick wall. Nothing's working, nothing's working. And you just get up, take a walk.
Boy.
It just kind of comes to you in the walk, and you get back, and sure enough, it problem solved.
Yeah.
So I like that. I like that approach a lot.
Yeah, I was just actually last weekend co-teaching a yoga and writing workshop. So we did a little bit of meditation, but we did some contemplative movement stuff, some yoga, which really is just all about kind of loosening up the body, right? Could be through mindful walking, could be through yoga and mindful movement or Tai Chi, or any of those kind of contemplative embodied activities are really powerful for just moving that creative energy and kind of getting the small sense of critical self out of the way and getting back to that expansive self.
All right, that's going to do it for this year's Eggy Awards. Thank you for tuning in each and every week. We love you guys. We couldn't do this without you. If you guys could do us a huge favor, just go to our leave us a comment and a review. Like, that helps more than you would think. If you could just go to your podcast player, whether it's Spotify, whether it's Podomatic, whatever format you use to listen to our podcast, if you could just leave us a review or a good comment, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what you say, just the comments and the 5-star reviews help more than you would think, and that's going to help boost our podcast this year. So if you enjoy this show and want us to keep doing it, the more that you guys help us, the more we can provide to you. So thanks again. Happy New Year, and we're looking forward to this upcoming year. We have a lot of really cool interviews coming up, so keep tuning in each and every week. Thanks again.